All right, thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of Untherapeutic. I'm super thankful today. We got Dr. Holiday Bell, sleep expert, but she's going to kind of elaborate a little bit more on just her expertise. But this is such a critical topic. I was talking before we started recording on how many clients I work with who experience challenges in their sleep, myself included. Sleep is so vital to just our overall well-being, but the truth of the matter is by the time you lay it down at night, it's not always as simple as close your eyes and then you wake up the next morning. So many people struggle with kind of turning it all off. But so we're going to kind of dive into what you can do, why that's the case, and everything else just related to sleep. But before we do, Dr. Holiday Bill, kind of tell everybody about yourself and kind of how did you even get involved in this line of work?
Yeah, well, thank you, Dr. Nick. I'm so excited to be here on the show with you talking about my favorite subject, which of course is sleep. So I'm a board certified physician and I'm a certified clinical sleep specialist. And
Mm.
I started on my journey to sleep really through my own struggle with insomnia and difficulty sleeping. I always like to say I'm someone who has always had a deep, loving relationship with sleep. But as I went through medical training, started to suffer from insomnia. And of all the things I've been through, it was absolutely the most frustrating and stressful experience of my life. And I became a much worse version of myself. So knew that I had to make a change. So I started to research everything there was about sleep, read every book I could get my hands on, started to volunteer in the sleep clinic. In that
Mm.
process, really fell in love with sleep and started to understand that it was about more than just feeling rested. It really was a key to functioning optimally in every facet of mental and physical health. Started to put into practice the things that I was learning. And so my sleep in my life really changed for the better. And I knew I had to help other people do the same.
Mm. That's amazing. That's amazing. You said you were the worst version of yourself. I always say you can tell when someone like me, you haven't been getting rest, because
Exactly. Yes.
it shows up. One of the things I just want to kind of dive in and you see online, and I try not to get too into the online whatever, but I feel like maybe several years ago there was this surge in people talking about hey, no rest and man, you got to just grind it out bump
Yes.
sleep is for suckers, like all these different mantras. Like as an expert in this, when you hear that, kind of what do you think in it, and why is that crazy?
Yeah, it makes me cringe when I hear those things. My favorite is "I'll sleep when I die."
Yes.
And my response is, "You are more likely to get to a closer grave if you're not sleeping." And it's scary and it's unfortunate, but it really is a truth. I think we are in this society that is so go, 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 hustle hard. We put rest and self-care on the back burner because it's a sentiment of being lazy, right? And not being ambitious if you're resting and sleeping, and people just really have it backwards. It's just something that has been so deeply ingrained and rooted in us because people, and it's starting to change, luckily, which I'm so
Mhm.
happy about. But people
Yeah.
up until recently didn't understand the function of sleep. So they just thought, I'm sleepy. If I don't get enough sleep, I'll just have a couple cups of coffee and I'm good to go. So why do I need to do this? As opposed to realizing that sleep really is critical in our overall mental and physical functioning. And now people, especially after COVID, are starting to understand, like, wait a minute, there's a little bit more to the sleeping. I probably should look more into that. But for a long time, sleep was the last thing that people wanted to talk about.
You talk about the function of sleep, and when I'm talking to people, I just tell them, "Hey, man, sleep is important. Trust me." But from a medical perspective, and I know it's probably more than we could probably cover in the time that we have, but why is it so important? Like, if I were trying to explain to someone from a real medical perspective, this is why sleep is so important. What do you tell them?
Yes, like you said, sleep literally affects every single part of your functioning, your being. The way that I describe it, I kind of break it into a couple different buckets. So you have the physical effects of not getting enough sleep. It's not just about being tired or sleepy. When you're not getting enough sleep, you actually trigger your body's fight or flight stress response system that increases the release of the stress hormones, cortisol, and adrenaline. Because your body's saying, if we are not taking time to devote to this very important restorative process, we must be under some kind of threat or danger. Chronically elevated levels of those hormones lead to chronic inflammation that weakens your blood vessels, increases your risk of high blood pressure, puts strain on your heart, increasing your risk of cardiovascular disease. And high levels of cortisol actually decreases your body's response to insulin, increasing your risk of type 2 diabetes. Your immune system functions at its peak when you're sleeping. And so when you're not devoting enough time to that, you make yourself more likely to get sick, literally. There are research studies that show that sleeping less than 7 hours per night prior to exposure to a virus makes you 3 times as likely to actually develop symptoms of the virus. We also know that your body goes to work clearing out debris in your brain because your cerebral spinal fluid increases while you sleep. And we're learning now that chronic insufficient sleep is related to neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's. In
Mm,
addition, your risk of mental health disorders like anxiety and depression increase 10 and 17 times respectively when you have insomnia or significant sleep disorders, because during sleep is when your emotional control centers communicate with your emotional regulatory centers. So there is nothing that is not affected. You're also more likely to gain weight because your hunger hormones are increased in the state of insufficient sleep, and the hormone that signals that you're full, leptin, is decreased. You're less likely to be active. Your basal metabolic rate decreases. So there's literally nothing that's not affected. The worst thing you can do for your health is not get enough sleep.
wow, wow. Look, hearing that, it puts so much in perspective, especially when you start thinking about, and again, I'm sure we can all kind of attest to it. When you working on a project, it's busy at work, and then you're tired, and then you get sick. And
Mhm. Exactly.
always just say, oh, I was just stressed. But in reality, a lot of it, to your point, is because I wasn't getting rest as a result of
Mhm.
whatever it is that I was doing. Man, that's
Absolutely.
great, especially when you talk about the weight gain too, because
Mhm.
we all try to lose some weight around here, but no one talks about getting more rest as a part of
Exactly, and
the
people will sacrifice sleep. They'll wake up at 4 a.m. and 5 a.m. to go to the gym. Great, you should absolutely work out, but you're not even giving enough time for your muscles to repair themselves and build the muscle that you're trying to build when you break it down in the gym. So you're actually shooting yourself in the foot by not getting enough sleep. It really is that third pillar: nutrition, exercise, and sleep is so important.
The million-dollar question though is, a lot of people value rest, but what I hear oftentimes is I just can't turn my brain off at night.
Mhm, mhm.
Especially if you're in a demanding job, demanding career, business. It's like go, go. Even if you're not, you got kids, you got a spouse, like it's just it's like as soon as you wake up, your feet hit the ground running. And so
Yeah,
by the
absolutely.
time it's time to turn it off or turn it down, it's still like in go mode.
Mhm.
How
Yep.
do you kind of get to a point where you can turn your I won't say turn your brain off, but you know what I mean? Just kind of
Yeah,
dial it
no, 100%.
down.
I
Yeah.
I think the biggest issue when it comes to that, so obviously we're all busy. We all take on so much more these days, especially when you're working and maybe you're a parent or a spouse. You have so many hats and roles that you wear. But the problem is that people do all those things, right? So we go throughout our busy day working, taking care of home duties. We binge watch our favorite show. And then we think just because we turn the lights off, now it's time to go to sleep. And it really doesn't work like that. Your brain needs a transition point from all of that go, 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 stress, racing thoughts of the day to the calmness of sleep. And if you don't give it that transition, it will use sleep as a way to do that, because we often don't even give ourselves time to process any of our thoughts throughout the day because we're just going, we're just on autopilot. And so
Mhm.
when it's quiet and all the distractions are gone, our brain's like, cool, let's think about all these things that we really didn't get a chance to process. So the first part is giving your brain that transition time. I think one of the most underrated things when it comes to getting better sleep as an adult is having a consistent bedtime routine, an unwind routine that you set aside specifically to going to sleep every single night, and something that is relaxing, something conducive to sleep that doesn't include binge watching your favorite show, social media, all those things, something that relaxes your body and mind. And then what can be helpful for some people who really have just those racing thoughts or anxieties that keep them up is a brain dump, or a worry diary is another term that we have for that, where you literally set aside time well before you're going to sleep. We don't want to connect it to your bedtime routine, but you just write down everything that comes to your mind with action items next to it. So, like if there's a project coming up, be very specific. Tomorrow, I'm starting the outline. The next day, I'm working on the presentation, because again, that allows your brain to process those thoughts so it doesn't feel the need to do that during the time you're supposed to be falling asleep.
Is there like a set time? I mean, again, some people go to bed early and wake up early. Some people go to bed late and then kind of, wake up a little bit later. Is there like an ideal window that we should all aim for when it comes to when we should get in the bed? Or is it just the amount of sleep that we get?
Yeah, so it depends on your chronotype. And so some people are naturally early birds. I would say most people fall into the early bird category, putting it very simplistically. Now we know there are four different chronotypes, and some people are night owls. If you're a night owl, it actually is better if you can set your life up in a way that functions according to your natural circadian rhythm. Although life often isn't doesn't allow that to happen. If you can, that would be the most ideal. So the ideal window will be when you naturally have a dip in your circadian rhythm, which for night owls will be a little bit later, and then you're waking up a little bit later too. So there's no
Yeah.
specific window that works for everyone. If you can align yourself with your natural circadian tendency, that would actually be the best thing to do.
What's the kind of bootleg way that you can tell what your natural rhythm is? Like
Yeah, no, that's a
I'm
good.
sure there's a more professional way, but like
Yeah,
your
yeah.
common brother out there, he like,
Yeah,
oh,
that's a good question. So, first of all, circadian rhythms and chronotypes tend to really start from birth and kind of follow you throughout life. As we get a little bit older, we naturally tend to shift a little bit earlier for everybody. But if you were to say, if I had no obligations, so I didn't have to get up for work or childcare duties or anything, when would I naturally fall asleep? Like, not because I'm binge watching my favorite show and I just keep hitting next. Like, when would my body tell me to fall asleep? For instance, for me, I am actually a natural night owl. If I had no other daily constraints, I would probably go to sleep somewhere around 2 a.m. and wake up at about 11 a.m. And I need 9 hours of sleep. And that would be natural for me, and I would love it and function so well. My life, unfortunately, does not allow me to do that. But people, if they really thought about it, they say, "Oh, if I really didn't have anything else to do, and I could just go to sleep and wake up at my desired time," you kind of find that you really fall into one of those categories.
yeah, just hearing 2 a.m. is like, ooh, that takes me back to college because there's no way in the world I can stay up at 2 a.m. right now. Just naturally, let
Yes,
me say
yes.
a lot of times you have couples, one person's a night owl, and it's
Mhm.
just crazy how this works, right? One
Yeah.
person's a night owl, other person wakes up, super early in the morning. If you were counseling that couple from a health perspective, what advice would you give them to kind of find that healthy balance?
Yeah, yeah. So first I would say both of you need to work on prioritizing sleep. And I can actually say this from experience. So I am
Mm,
naturally a night owl. My husband is actually a morning bird. I don't function with in accordance with my night owl schedule because my life isn't set up that way. But I need more sleep than he does. So I go to sleep before him and I wake up after him. And I'm
okay.
also a lighter sleeper. So the way that
Mhm,
we've had to set up our lives is I go to sleep before him. We bought the biggest mattress that would fit in our room. It's a motion non-transfer mattress. So when he's coming in later, I don't feel anything. He's
mm,
become a ninja and sneaking in the room so that we're not turning on lights, we're not making any sounds. I use a blackout sleep mask and a sleep machine in case, or a sound machine in case there are sounds. I'm kind of blocking that out. And then
okay.
same when we're getting out of bed in the morning. So we both prioritize each other's routine, and we try to do it in a way that is least disruptive as possible. There
Mhm,
are some couples who are not able to do that. It just doesn't work out for them feasibly, or one snores really loudly and the other can't sleep. And in some cases, it's better to have a sleep divorce than it is
mhm,
to have a real divorce. Meaning, maybe you have some quality time together in your evening routine, but then you actually sleep in separate spaces. If
yeah.
that's the only way that both of you can get good quality sleep, it's actually better for each individual and for the marriage overall than struggling not being able to sleep.
It's so funny you say that. I was working with this couple a while back, and I remember the wife telling me about, and this is before I knew what she was going to say. She was like, "Man, my husband, he's torturing me." And so, I hear that. I'm thinking, like torture. you know, I'm like, we got to call the police or something. And so I'm like, torture. And she's like, yeah, torture me. He's been. I'm like, I'm literally going preparing for the worst. And essentially, he snored.
That's
And
a certain type of torture.
it's torture. I mean, you talk about a sigh of relief. I was like, okay, we can figure out the sleep arrangements because if you were saying he's tortured you in a very real way, then that may be a little bit beyond my expertise.
Exactly.
We talk about like things you can do, but in general, when you think about what contributes to people not being able to get quality rest at night, is it a sign that they have too much on their plate? Is it their night routine is off? Is it some underlying health issues or concerns? Like, what do you
Mhm.
think? Just from, well, not even what do you think, in your experience and professional expertise, what contributes most to people not getting adequate rest?
Yeah, so it certainly could be all of the above of what you said, but what really contributes the most is not prioritizing sleep. So
Mm,
I think even when people start to understand the importance of sleep, they don't necessarily make it a priority. And people don't realize that sleep is a 24-hour process. So the moment you wake up, you're contributing to how you're sleeping at night. And so people will say, oh, I want to sleep well, or I know I need sleep. But then again, as I mentioned before, we're going throughout our day doing all these things that have nothing to do with sleep. And then we're like, okay, whatever time I have left over, that's what I'm going to dedicate to sleep. And that's
yeah.
just not how that works. Our circadian rhythm thrives on consistency and really setting aside a specific amount of time, the same time each night, and waking up at the same time each day, setting up your day, your night for better sleep. So it really requires, I say, instead of thinking of sleep as the ending of your day, start thinking of it as the beginning of your tomorrow. Set yourself up
Mm.
for better sleep as soon as you wake up in the morning. And that is really how you prepare for sleep. For a lot of people I work with, just shifting that mindset and really starting your day with sleep in mind makes a huge difference. And then there are people who fall into the smaller buckets of some medical conditions and some sleep disorders and things that contribute. But for the most part, people just don't, they haven't been taught to prioritize sleep.
When you say, and I love it. I mean, I've never even heard it or even thought about it in that way, but it's so true just hearing you talk about like prioritizing it, particularly at the beginning. But what does that look like? Do you think of that first step is literally just finding a time to consistently go to sleep, or is it, considering what you take on throughout the day? Like, what are those practical, kind of tangible steps that people can take to really prioritize sleep?
Yeah. So the first thing is, the way that I prioritize sleep is I said I need 9 hours of sleep to feel fully rested. 7 hours doesn't cut it. 8 hours is not ideal. So when I am scheduling my day from 10 p.m. to 7 a.m., I'm asleep. That is one thing that I do know. And then everything else that I do outside of that has to fall in line with that schedule. That is what it looks to prioritize something. Just
Okay.
like you're going to prioritize going to work, right? You're not going to be like, well,
Mm.
if I make
I
it,
get
I
me
make
over
it.
there.
If the show is
Yeah.
on, I might not make it. If I have too much to do, I just might not make the 8 hours. You know that from whatever 9 to 5 you're going to work. The same thing should account for your sleep, prioritizing it. When you wake up in the morning is so important. Waking up at the same time each and every day is one of the most important things you can do for your sleep. And it's
Mm.
actually more important than going to sleep at the same time each and every
Really?
day. Getting,
Why is
yes,
that?
absolutely. Because it helps to reinforce your circadian rhythm. So we think about that
Mm.
circadian rhythm. This is a natural genetic thing. It's roughly 24 hours, a little bit longer than that, where you have natural increases in alerting factors, dips throughout your day, and then sleepy cues that are sent at night. You can train your circadian rhythm to have those cues sent at the same time each and every day, which helps peak alertness during the day and then peak sleepiness at night. And waking up at the same time each and every day is the best way to do that. That shuts off when you wake up, you get natural light exposure that shuts off the melatonin release, and you're teaching your brain that this is when you want to be awake and alert, and subsequently when you want your melatonin to be sent because it's on that 24-hour cycle. So that's one of the strongest cues that you can send to your brain, in addition to getting natural light exposure. So really setting up your day for better sleep by doing those things and having that transition point, that bedtime routine to wind down to sleep at night. But I say start by whatever amount of sleep you need and you know you can consistently dedicate, those hours are blocked for sleep. And then everything else falls into place around it. And you will actually find you're more efficient in all of the other things you have to do when you're well rested. It doesn't take as long as it does when you're operating off of insufficient sleep.
Man, and so, speaking of melatonin, kind of what are your thoughts on, I was even before we went live, I was telling you about just, some challenges with sleep. And again, I've done everything from the nighttime tea to the Z-Quil to the melatonin, which give me crazy dreams, like it does. I'm like, I'm good on that. What are your thoughts though on all of these things that and obviously once I look up something, even just typing in sleep experts, right? Now I get all these ads on take this, do this.
Of
But like
course.
what are there any is there anything that you recommend? Do you discourage people from taking some of those, supplements, products? What is your thoughts on those?
So let's start with melatonin because I think that's the one I know that that's the one that most it widely is consumed and people are most familiar with. I think so. We naturally produce melatonin. I already kind
Mhm.
of mentioned that in terms of our circadian rhythm, and there are ways to increase your natural melatonin production really through the strategic utilization of light and darkness. So light exposure during the day within the first hour of waking up, and then no light exposure at night when you're getting ready for bed. There
Mhm.
is a use for supplemental melatonin, but really only in situations where your circadian rhythm is thrown off for other reasons. So when you're trying to retrain your circadian rhythm, reinforce it or pull it back or move it forward for another reason, supplemental melatonin can be helpful. Situations like jet lag, when you're traveling across time zones and now the circadian rhythm that you need to have is out of sync with the one that you have been living in, it can be helpful to utilize some melatonin supplementation for that. I've had to do is I'm a natural night owl. And so on times where I've had like extended vacations, I've allowed myself to drift to my natural night owl schedule. But then when I have to get back on my normal schedule, that's much more difficult to do. So a short term low dose is the key. Use of melatonin can be helpful then, but it's very short term, a couple of days, low dose. You really shouldn't need it beyond that. It's not really a sleeping pill. So people are always like, oh, it didn't work for me because it's not meant to do that. It's really meant to reinforce or retrain your circadian rhythm. I really am not a fan of prescription sleep medications or like the Benadryl equals of the world. There are lots of medications that will put you to sleep, but not recreate the restorative architecture of natural sleep. What I
Mhm.
like to compare it to is anyone who has had surgery and been under general anesthesia, where you sleep, yes. Did you wake up and be like, oh my gosh, I'm so refreshed, I'm restored, that felt great? No, because technically you were put to sleep, but you didn't have that natural architecture that natural sleep gives. And the whole point of getting good quality sleep is to reap all the benefits and feel good during your waking hours. If you're so groggy and disoriented just because you were asleep, that's not really the goal, right? So I don't really like utilizing it for that reason. My favorite supplement, and it really is just like a booster, it's like an adjunct for sleep. It's not a sleeping pill, is magnesium glycinate. And it really
Okay.
is actually great for so many reasons, but it helps to set the stage for healthy sleep and promote deeper, better quality sleep by relaxing the mind and the muscles. So that I love and I take every single night. Other
Okay.
than that, there are no supplements for sleep that I am regularly recommending.
I thought you were gonna say red wine, and I was like, okay, perfect.
No, that's
I was
actually not great
waiting.
for sleep at all.
Doctor's orders. What are your thoughts though on wine at night? Because I do know a lot of people, a little nightcap before they
Yeah.
get in bed.
Yeah, so people like to use alcohol, wine as a nightcap, and it makes sense because initially alcohol is a sedative, meaning it will make you sleepy. The
Mhm,
problem is that it's broken down very quickly, usually within 3 to 4 hours, and then becomes a stimulant. So if you
mhm.
have alcohol before bed, it can lead to broken, poor quality sleep, where you're waking up in the middle of the night or waking up earlier than intended, and it interferes with your REM sleep. So even if you were to stay asleep throughout the night, you're actually not getting good quality sleep after drinking alcohol.
Got it. That makes sense. That makes sense. And when you say REM sleep, explain what it is that you mean when you say that.
Yeah, so there are four different sleep stages. We have in the one sleep, which is that very light stage of sleep. In two, where we spend most of our time, is a little bit deeper. Everything starts to slow down. In three, which is the deepest stage of sleep. And then REM, or rapid eye movement sleep, which is where most of the dreaming occurs.
Okay.
Each stage of sleep is very important, but have different processes that occur. Generally speaking, this is a very generalization. We say deep sleep is very restorative for the body, REM sleep is restorative for the mind. There is some overlap. But when you're interfering with your REM sleep or your deep sleep, you interfere with your sleep quality. So you may wake up still feeling tired and groggy and not as restored or refreshed as if you would have gone throughout all of the sleep stages as intended.
That's good. That's good. You mentioned earlier just not being a fan of the prescription. When do you recommend someone see a doctor?
So if you have chronic insomnia, which is defined as difficulty falling asleep, staying asleep, or waking up earlier than intended for at least 3 nights for 3 or more months, absolutely you need to see a doctor. If you feel like you have done what you need to do, you're trying to fall asleep consistently and you're not able to, or you're not able to stay asleep, go see a doctor. Or if you feel like you're getting sleep, but the quality is not great. So you're like, I'm asleep, but I'm waking up and I'm still tired. I have morning headaches or any of those things, go see a doctor. What I really say is if you're trying to sleep and you can't, go see a doctor. I don't think there's like a magic number or magic time. I like to compare it to, if you were to fall outside and break your leg, you wouldn't be like, well, let's just see what happens
Yeah, yeah.
with
Let me see
this.
how
You're
it
gonna
heals up a
go
little bit. Yeah.
to the doctor because you know that you need your leg to be functioning appropriately for you to function normally. Same thing for your sleep. Sleep is so crucial and important. So I think that if it's not occurring the way you need it to, whether that's quality or quantity, it's never too soon. it can be later than we want. Never too soon to go ahead and speak to your medical provider about it.
That makes sense. And this is completely unrelated, but I was just thinking about it as you were talking about getting sunlight the first hour when you wake up. What about people who work from home? Is there any studies out there that suggest, maybe, you know, going to the office or being around people, does that have an impact on your sleep, positive or negative, in comparison to working from home? Or is it just,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah. So it does. So we saw through COVID and beyond that sleep worsened. And some of it was related to the anxiety of COVID, right? But even once that kind of died down, what we realized is that people were off of their normal routine. They weren't getting sunlight exposure, they weren't getting physical activity, there weren't specific things that they were doing at specific times that are actually very important for your sleep. As I mentioned, sleep is a 24-hour process. So the timing of activities, being physically active, getting outside are actually really crucial for sleep. And so those things being thrown off kind of allow for more of a free running circadian rhythm where we're not really reinforcing it the way that we should. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't have healthy sleep working from home, but that does mean that you need to be a little more intentional about it. So, first thing in the morning, getting outside and going for a quick walk, at least doing your morning routine by a nice open window with the blinds or shades open is important. Or if you're like me, I live in Chicago and now we're getting into the fall and winter months, and sometimes it's dark when I wake up in the morning.
and
Using a light
cold?
therapy box or light therapy glasses to simulate light exposure can also be helpful to reinforce your circadian rhythm.
That's good. That's good information. It really is because and again, obviously, a lot of times I'm working from the house, and you get so locked in to what it is that you're doing, and I never even made the association that maybe this could be impacting my sleep. Not so much being locked in, but just not getting outside, not
Exactly.
really having that natural sunlight. So, you wrote this book that I want to spend some time talking about called "Sleeping on the Job." First of all, I love the title. Okay.
Thank you.
I really do. It's creative. I really do. It's just, yeah. Explain a little bit about kind of what people can expect once they pick that book up, where they can pick it up, and kind of what are some of the takeaways once they get it.
Absolutely. So I happen to have a copy here, Sleeping on the Job, Proven
Yeah.
Strategies to Optimize Your Workplace Performance and Personal Well-being Through Better Sleep. So I really wrote this book because I work a lot with corporations and organizations on educating their workforce about the importance of sleep and educating them on how to improve their sleep. And what I realized in my work and really in my own struggles with insomnia, a lot of what we do and how we work impacts how we sleep and vice versa. How we sleep impacts how we work and how we perform. And so it's really hard to disconnect the two. A lot of the times when people talk about sleep, they talk about what you do at night, but sleep is really so much more than that. And how you structure and set up your day has a big impact on how you sleep. And how you structure and set up your day is going to be dependent on how and where you work. So I really wanted to write a book that meets people where they are in their workplaces, in their work environments, to give them some practical, simple, but strategic things that they can implement to start improving their sleep from day one, right away, and based on different work situations. So I have a chapter in here for remote workers, kind of like we just mentioned, for night shift workers, for rotating shift workers, because all of those things create and present unique challenges as it pertains to sleep. And I detail specific strategies that anyone can implement to make it easy, but also educate people on why we're doing that. I think it's easy to say, "Oh, do this or do that," but why? Making the connection really helps people to implement those things and continue to do so. So people walk away with a full plan that they can start to implement no matter what their work situation is, and also give education on why this is even important. How are these things impacting how you're performing at work and ultimately your goal for succeeding in the workplace?
I love it. I really do, especially when you talk about the why, because man, again, there's so much misinformation online,
Absolutely.
and again, as we were saying earlier, a lot of that misinformation is around this kind of grind, hustle culture, and I'm all for working hard, but not at the expense of what we know is going to contribute to our overall health and well-being, which is sleep. So I
Absolutely.
absolutely love that and appreciate it. Hey, I really appreciate you, just taking time to kind of share with us. Where can people find you online? Or if someone wanted to connect, or if there's a company out there that wanted to say, hey, we need her, where would they be able to find you at?
Yeah, the best place to reach me is on my website, thesolutionissleep.com. It has all of my contact information, my email, my socials. You can feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn and Instagram as well. But all of that information will be there, as well as a link to my book. You can find on Amazon, Barnes and Nobles, wherever you kind of buy books. But feel free to connect with me. I'd love to connect with anyone who wanted to chat further.
I appreciate that. And we'll include a link to the website and to the book as well, just in the notes. So if you want to pick a copy of, which I strongly encourage people to do, you'll be able to purchase that as well. So, hey, Dr. Holiday Bell, thank you so much for taking time today. I'm about to take a nap right now. I'm joking, not yet, but I am gonna incorporate some of what we talked about because again, sleep is
Good.
so critical to our overall health and success. So definitely follow us on Instagram and Nick Hardy underscore or and subscribe on your favorite streaming platform. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me.